Good evening, everyone. This is Jay Simmons, president of Mach 30, and this is the July 2014 Reports Hangout. I'm joined tonight by Aaron Harper, Mach 30 volunteer, Rebecca McGrady, Mach 30 board member, Greg Moran, Mach 30 board member and vice president,
Howdy.
and Julie Fowler, Mach 30 volunteer, who is with us by text. This is a very special Reports Hangout. We have just completed our first conference, Apogee I, and we have all sorts of good stuff to report on about what happened there and what will happen because of the planning work done there. For those that are not familiar with Mach 30, our mission is to hasten the advancement of humanity into a spacefaring civilization. We do this through open design, also called open source hardware, sustainable leadership, and a bias towards mature technology. We're a nonprofit and completely dependent on the generous donations of time and money from our volunteers and supporters. So I encourage you to take a look at mach30.org and click on the Catalyst Club link to support us financially, or join us in our regular Hangouts on Thursday nights at 8:30 and 10 o'clock, the 10 o'clock being our technical Hangouts, engineer speak, to join us in our project work. Without further ado, allow me to dive into our updates during the Reports Hangout. Ordinarily, we structure this by major project areas, what the board refers to as buses, as in, I want to ride that bus, it sounds like it's going cool places, and led by bus drivers. But before we dive into the buses, I have a quick special update on what happened at Apogee. So I'm extremely happy to say that Apogee I, our first ever conference and what is planned to be an annual event, was a huge success. We got to see a bunch of our volunteers in person, and they got to meet each other in person, including folks that hadn't had a chance to be in the same hangout before even. The community did some really great work and had some really good celebrations. We talked about ways of experimenting with what Jeremy is referring to as code CAD right now, or programmatic CAD, a kind of CAD where you use software techniques to model your drawings. Also, we did a lot of work on identifying how Mach 30 can best interface with the three core communities it touches, namely the space exploration community, the maker community, and the open source hardware movement. We had a lot of fun at our party, which is very good, and the awards ceremony was a hit. We're going to be doing that annually, so I'm very glad to see that it went over well and that it went so well. Again, congratulations, Julie, Aaron, and Matt. You guys earned every bit of the recognition that we gave you and more. We're very excited to have you with us and grateful for all your contributions. After the party, the board had a retreat to look at long-range planning. And as part of that work, we are realigning our bus structure around the activities as specified in our planning documents, especially the IRS 1023, the form we use to apply for nonprofit status. And so as we continue the Hangout, you're going to hear a new set of buses. But if you've been hanging around Mach 30, some of these things will actually be very familiar because there are guiding principles and the way we're actually organized as a nonprofit. The board's primary effort right now for coming out of Apogee is focused on developing a 5-year vision narrative to document and share where Mach 30 is headed. We're planning on announcing that publicly at Apogee II next summer. Other details about all the planning work we're doing will be discussed on a bus-by-bus basis. But I did real quick want to cover some of the narrative themes that came out of the retreat while we were this past weekend. And these are the broad brushstrokes of the kind of things that we want to be working towards as we approach the year 2020. First and foremost, the board identified that export control is something that we're going to really focus on getting our hands wrapped around. As we said during the retreat, by 2020, export control is going to be a thing that we manage. It will not manage us. On the approach towards 2020, this is another theme was the theme of Mach 30 grows up without losing its sustainable startup and open and transparent culture. So this is about moving towards sustainable business operations and revenue streams, starting to hire staff, and growing into an organization that can tackle larger and larger problems with regards to spaceflight and has a larger connection out to the world. Speaking of connections, another one of the themes is that Mach 30 will be an organization that is well connected and is a sought-after collaborator in terms of volunteers and partnerships, opportunities to work with the educational community and the maker community and the open source hardware and the spaceflight communities. We're going to be very focused on seamlessly connecting our volunteers, both virtually and physically. We've always been a distributed organization. We will continue to be so, and we'll work to make that distribution of our volunteers and collaborators as smooth and out of the way and invisible as possible. The catchphrase that was going around was, no matter where you are in the U.S., you're at Mach 30. And then lastly, we are trying to make sure that we are focused on our mission and that we have the appropriate planning and visioning to steer our development work, especially as it relates to hardware projects. So you can look forward to seeing our teams in the open source spaceflight work really start to focus on projects that are particularly related to launch vehicle technology, as the board believes that is the most critical hurdle to overcome at present for becoming a spacefaring civilization. Folks that were there for the retreat and the meetings, do you guys have anything else to add? I did my best to summarize, but I'm certain I missed stuff. It was a very busy and productive weekend.
Yes.
Or I could catch all of it, like Pokemon.
No,
All right.
I think you covered everything in my notes.
Cool. Excellent. Well, then allow me to introduce the first of the newly christened buses, the Open Source Spaceflight Hardware Bus. So this is the bus that represents the lion's share of our activities long term. This is the bus that represents managing and developing and planning for all of our open source hardware projects, especially those that directly relate to space, but also those projects that are in support of moving towards spaceflight related projects. In our planning documentation, these activities in the long term take up 50% of our planned resources. Clearly, success in this bus is contingent on the Export Control Task Force completing the development of the required policies and procedures to work on export control projects. But in the meantime, to give them room to work, the Board of Directors will work with the open source hardware team, also called our engineer speak folk, to find a fertile technology field where we can develop a 24 to 30 month long technical roadmap that is completely export control free, that all the projects we'd want to work on are going to steer well away from export controls, so that the technical folks can work openly and collaboratively and without fear of bumping into the fence. And this will buy the ECTF time to complete their work on developing the necessary policies and procedures, so that after that roadmap's complete, we can do a longer range roadmap that includes export control technology. In addition, the board is asking folks over on our engineering team to work on a suitable educational application that's also insurable, unlike some of the problems we've had with finding insurance for Shepherd, so that we can use it as a revenue stream. This project will be integrated into the roadmap in such a way that supports our projects, so this will not be a little side street or detour. The plan is to inject this into the plans early enough that when the roadmap is being developed, that it is something that can directly support future development work. One of the ideas that we're thinking about that got tossed around quite a bit at the retreat for a technology field to work in would be the propulsion side of high-powered rocketry. There's quite a bit of non-export control technology in there that gives us a lot of runway to develop a long-running roadmap, both in terms of the testing apparatus and actual custom propulsion systems. And if we went that route, which we haven't decided yet, but that's certainly something that got talked about a lot, an example of an educational application inside the roadmap boundary would be a cold gas thruster works on compressed air and a companion test stand for it. Again, these are just examples. The board and the engineer speak community will work together closely to determine where we're really headed. But like I said, these got bandied about quite a bit, so there's certainly some interest and some traction going on there. Folks that were in the room, did I miss anything? Other comments or things like that? Alrighty. So with that, we'll move on to the next bus, which is the supporting the open source hardware community bus. So this should come as no surprise. This is a major area that we are organized around. We have often talked and always talk about the idea that a rising tide helps all ships, and that an open source spaceflight hardware community cannot exist without a vibrant open source hardware community. In our planning document, we talk about spending 20% of our resources on supporting the broader open source hardware community. And this includes our efforts to implement tools and promote the use of open source hardware as an engineering approach. So this is things like Open Design Engine, the ITAR-EZ and stuff like that. And planning work that we're doing in this bus includes continuing to press forward on enhancements to ODE with a special focus right now on its UI to make it much more user-friendly and to make the rendered instructions easier to read visually. Continuing to work on ITAR-EZ, like I mentioned a moment ago. Department of State to make sure we get the necessary support to ensure that it's a quality product that not only ourselves but other organizations can utilize. And we're also going to start, in fact we already have started to open up discussions and investigation of open source programmatic, or like I said, code CAD is what Jeremy's calling it right now. The idea here is that we want our hardware developers to have a free and open and powerful CAD package to model their structures and other engineering designs in. Right now, the buy-in for professional tools is simply too expensive, and there's still a lot of work to do in the available open source tools. So we're doing some work to partner with the developer behind CAD Query, and we're going to experiment with that for a little while, and we'll see how that goes, and we will continue to iterate on these ideas going forward. Questions or comments from the rest of the panel? Alrighty. This takes us then to the next bus, which is the Education and Outreach bus. Since our founding, Mach 30 has believed that part of being a spacefaring civilization is having a public that is informed both about the vocabulary of spaceflight and the realities of spaceflight, just like we have a society that's well versed in the nature of automobiles and aircraft from a user perspective. We feel it's very important for the larger community to be aware of the role of space and the role it moves into as we become a spacefaring civilization. So education and outreach activities are extremely important to us. This is another 20% marker in our planning, in our long-range planning documents in terms of resource expenditure. Activities that we'll be working on over the next period of time while we continue to do long-term visioning around our goals towards 2020 include continuing to work on how we interface with the three communities I mentioned at the beginning of the Hangout, the space exploration community, the maker community, and the open source hardware community, but also how we support our volunteers and give them the tools they need to feel welcome, to get onboard the organization at the pace that they're comfortable with and they're capable of doing work, and make sure they have the resources they need to do good work. It also includes improving our presence online. So we'll be redoubling our efforts in social media. We'll be working on publishing on our blog more frequently, and in general just being more present and transparent with our reporting on activities beyond the minutes that we keep from all of our meetings. Any questions or comments, things I left out? Alrighty. The next bus is actually a bus that is intended to be on hold for the long term. It's our 10% rule, borrowed from organizations like Google, and this is the Developing New Enabling Spaceflight Technologies bus. This is a bus that is meant to give us room to develop hardware and other related technologies to spaceflight, to address a lack of available mature technology required to complete our mission. As we are at the bottom of our technology tree, the beginning of our roadmaps, this is an area that we do not expect to hit for a while, so this bus will likely not have much to report for some time. But look forward to, as we move up the roadmaps and down the roadmaps and up the technology trees, for us to find places where we need to do longer range reaching research in order to move newer technology into a position of maturity so that we can rely on it in systems development. Which takes us to our last bus. One of the things I really like about the new structure is that we have far fewer buses. It's a little easier to wrap your head around what's going on at Mach 30 this way, I think. And this bus is our business operations bus. So this is the bus that is the home to all of our essential business activities related to running the organization. In previous Hangouts, activities that fell under buses such as the partnerships bus and the operations bus would all be here, as well as HR, etc. This bus has a lot of activity to do in the upcoming years, especially because of that theme I mentioned earlier about Mach 30 grows up. This is the bus that has to make all the business cases close and has to work on getting the organization to a point where it can hire staff and where it can have facilities and things like that. So this includes things like seeking marketing and social media support with an emphasis on professional experience, just like we rely on for our technical papers. Pardon me for just a second. I think we had some feedback going on there. There we go. So, like I said, one of the things that we're looking to do is value the professional contributions from fields beyond our technical areas. Not only do we value our engineers, but we value our media folks and our marketing folks and our administrative folks. So look for us to be seeking professional support from those fields as well, and for opportunities to contribute along those lines. We also want to investigate improving our internal communication tools and making our communications more accessible to new volunteers and fans. We're experimenting with a system used by Automatic, the company behind WordPress, that they use in their internal communications, called P2. But if that doesn't work, for what we need, we will continue to explore other options. We will almost right away. You can rest assured that we'll start planning Apogee II and even thinking about what will happen at Apogee III. We're looking to find experienced event planners to support those events and future Apogees, so the board can focus on the actual activities at Apogee. We are going to continue our efforts to contract a bookkeeper and move towards professional services on the finance side as well as on the messaging and marketing side. And we're going to press forward to complete the 2020 vision narrative, as I mentioned above at the beginning of the Hangout. We are intending to present that publicly at Apogee II. It'll be a major piece of programming at Apogee II. And finally, we are going to start next year working on business planning for our first rocket shop. For those that haven't heard this term before, think of it like a makerspace type facility, but for developing open source spaceflight hardware projects as a specialized reason to exist, complete with the required export control systems and all that go with that. So a lot of stuff coming up. I'm very, very excited about the 2020 Vision Narrative work. This was work that was inspired in part by stuff that happened over at QLab, where Greg is at in his local makerspace in Albuquerque. Big thanks to the QLab folks for sharing their processes and documents with us. I don't think the retreat portion of Apogee would be nearly as successful as it was without that support. I also really should thank our sponsors once again for Apogee, because again, all of this work came out of Apogee and came out of support from the sponsors, our friends over at Club Siberia, Indies Makerspace, and the Hampton Inn, Indianapolis East, where we held our party and where our folks stayed while they were in Indianapolis. So I'm very, very excited about our upcoming work. And other comments from the panel?
There was also a very pretty cake.
There was, and there will be a blog post. What?
Did you get a picture of the cake?
We got lots of pictures of the cake. There's a story about the cake.
I don't think I've heard the story about the cake.
Yeah, the cake took many iterations to produce, and many trips to the store, because at first they didn't want to take a thumb drive with the image. They thought I should print it up.
Spoilers.
Spoilers.
It goes from there.
Yeah, and it goes from there. There will be a blog post, I hope, very soon. But first, we're going to write a blog post about the awards ceremony, because I want to make sure that everyone within the sound of my voice and the reach of our internet presence knows about the just amazing contributions of our volunteers. So first up on deck for blog posts is stuff about our awards ceremony and our awards winners. But then there will be cake reports. It was a beautiful cake.
That was a quick brain dump. And Jay, thanks for doing that summary of all of that information. It kind of came at everybody fast and furious, but I think it represents a slight shift the way Mach 30 is working, but not substantially to change anything that you guys would expect to see. We're doing the same kind of work. We're doing more projects as we get more volunteers. But what Jay mentioned in the restructuring is really just a way for the board to organize ourselves a little bit more thoroughly or clearly, and match the existing structure that we had put together. So from that perspective, it's a change for us, but from another perspective, not a big change at all. So look forward to seeing a lot more work from Mach 30 and all of the things that we've done in the past. And the one last comment I had is about the excitement of Apogee I. I think that represents a huge step forward for the group. We really hadn't had a chance to get our community involved together in one place for very much of our in-person work. This is the first time that almost everybody has gotten together and been able to party in person. So that was a lot of fun as well.
Absolutely.
And that was my feedback.
Thank you, Greg. That's ditto to all those points. Absolutely. At most, I think the possible perceived changes from the outside to this restructuring is really about the boards being able to maintain a tighter focus to ensure that we get things done on an even more timely basis. So that's, Greg. I think, Greg, you're absolutely right that for the most part, the nature of our activities will be mostly unchanged. It's really a way of keeping track of them.
Yep.
So expect more open source spaceflight hardware. Expect more partnerships with educators. Expect more reaching out to folks from those three communities we keep talking about, and expect more cool things. And I am already pumped and primed for Apogee II.
Excellent.
So, well, there you go, folks.
Yeah, count me in for the next one.
Excellent. Wouldn't have it any other way.
Will do. We'll look forward to seeing you there, wherever it may be.
Yep.
Very
No,
good.
that's how we know it was a success. If someone, not us, wants to come back.
Amen. Amen.
Okay, I got to make it official. Next one will be an order of magnitude better, right?
Excellent. Excellent.
Now it's a meeting.
Well, all right, guys.
All right, I do have 2 more comments before Jay does the closing there. I'm going to try something new. It's specific for YouTube, and I want to say that if you like this video, please click the favorite button, and if you want to hear more from Mach 30, there's a button for subscribe to subscribe. Please click that, and you'll be able to stay in touch with all the stuff we have going on. Yeah, I don't know which part of the screen, so
I think the YouTubers are all supposed to know, so we need to figure that out.
Like I said, it's new, so we'll go from there.
Excellent. That's a good one. Did you have 2, or was that both of them? The subscribe and
That was
the...
both.
Yeah, gotcha.
Please favorite and subscribe.
Excellent. Good call, Greg. Good call. So that's definitely part of our increased social media awareness. Awesome. And with that, I will bring the July Reports Hangout to a close. If you have questions, feel free to leave comments on the video, and we will reply back to them. Again, I want to direct you to our website, mach30.org. That's M-A-C-H 30. It's the speed of sound, Mach, not something else. And be sure to check out the Catalyst Club link, because we are reliant on the generous donations of our supporters. As they used to say in the 60s, no bucks, no Buck Rogers. It's just as true today as it was back then. And I will sign off with Ad Astra Precipitatum, to the stars through community. Thank you all, and have a great night.